Thank you, Professor Judi Wakhungu, for giving us this opportunity. Kindly tell us something about the Giant Summit that we are set to host in our country coming Friday.
The Giant Summit is going to be held in Nanyuki, April 29th, which is this Friday. The Giant Summit is actually a summit of a club, and this is a club of presidents and heads of state. And what they are doing is, these are presidents that represent the range states being those that host elephants in this country. The first club members are the President of Kenya, who's actually now going to host the first Giant Summit, the President of Gabon, the President of Botswana, and the President of Uganda, all of whom will either be here or they will send their representatives. The message that they have in common is that we are losing space for giants. And the giants in this case is not the heads of state themselves, but the elephants. As you know, ecosystems, if you can win space for elephants, it means that you can win space for all other wildlife. So they're coming together to compare notes on what they can do collectively. They've also invited a number of prominent corporates who are interested in raising funds to conserve wildlife. They've also invited a number of international philanthropists who will also come to share and compare notes to convey the message, especially to the demand countries, that consuming ivory and consuming rhino horn destroys our biodiversity. It actually leads to the extinction of iconic species such as elephant.
Professor, actually getting the heads of state to convene this particular meeting is an important direction towards conservation. However, we have a problem where the niche market of the products that come from ivory is still wide open out there, and they have the money that they use to buy those particular artifacts. What are we doing to ensure that these particular countries appreciate the fact that we need to conserve our elephants?
We're not only addressing demand, we're also addressing transit countries, and we are also addressing source countries. Collectively, we have to do this, and this is why it needs to be done and championed at the head of state level, because they have the reach and the mandate to address all of those particular areas. Kenya, for example, in August 2013, we signed an MOU, myself and my counterpart in China signed an MOU to work together to conserve our wildlife. So we're working very closely in partnership with China in this particular instance, not only to raise awareness that using ivory trinkets and using rhino horn as medicine is particularly very selfish. Not only that, it leads to the extinction of animals. So we do understand that we're just not addressing ourselves. We're using this opportunity to address the international markets as well. But awareness and education does have to be raised in those market countries. Let me also remind you that after we signed the MOU in August 2013, we also had the privilege of hosting the Chinese Premier Li Keqiang here in Nairobi National Park, where we specifically took him to the ivory burning site, and we were able to describe to him what the use of ivory actually does in terms of terminating and extinguishing elephants, for example. So the awareness is also being raised in the demand areas.
Now, you've just spoken about something that I've been thinking about, and that's the issue of extinction. Apart from the harvesting, that is the killing of the poaching of the elephants, we have a shrinking habitat, which is also impacting on the survival of these jumbos. What can we do as a public, as Africans, to ensure that we leave the rangelands where these animals live for the animals?
As you rightly describe it, the space is shrinking, and that's why my biggest challenge as Cabinet Secretary who's in charge of wildlife, my biggest challenge is finding the space for the wildlife. As you can see with the demographic transition, the space is shrinking as we are expanding in terms of population, but also as we're expanding in terms of our development. The space is getting less and less, as is very clearly depicted here in Nairobi with the fight I have to save Nairobi National Park. What we have done in the Wildlife Act 2013 is we have made land use, wildlife land use, as part and parcel of our strategy. So we have provided opportunities for individuals or members with large properties of land to actually convert that land into conservancies, therefore expanding space for our wildlife to really enhance and improve and maintain our biodiversity. We've seen a great interest in this, particularly in the northern parts of the country, where we do have more space, we do have more land, and also the land tenure regime there is really held in families or in group ranches. We've been able to take this opportunity to expand to at least now 54 of these conservancies. The members of these group ranches have begun to see that when communities conserve wildlife, they actually benefit, financially, materially, from conserving wildlife, running their own lodges, running their own ecotourism facilities. So we're not just conveying the message of preserving wildlife to posterity, but that it is an excellent livelihood, and it's an excellent land use, and that people can benefit from this type of work.
Looking at our wildlife law, the Wildlife Conservation and Management Act, yes, we have the law in Kenya, but our regional countries may not be having a similar law to that one, and perhaps they've left their gates open for anyone to go in and decimate the elephant population. What are we doing as a country to encourage these particular countries to also follow what Kenya has done?
One of the reasons that we have meetings, international meetings and regional meetings, like for example now the Giants Club and the summit that they're having, is to compare notes and regimes as countries within the region and also as neighbors. We also have the other platforms, the East African Community, SADC, ECOWAS, where we can also compare these notes. And what we try to do using the regional platforms is to come to an agreement so that, for example, the example that I would like to give is the relationship between, say, Kenya and Tanzania, where hunting has been banned on the Kenyan side of the border, but on the Tanzanian side of the border, it is still controlled, but it is permitted. But I think that in terms of our diplomacy and our working together, we are very optimistic that we will soon see, because we all agree that the wildlife is endangered. We all agree about that. So I think increasingly we're beginning to see diplomacy and discussions where we will able to harmonize, our laws and our regimes, because for all of us, what we want to do is to protect our wildlife for posterity.
We know that on 30th we'll ban over 100 tons of ivory.
Yes.
Some have argued that why not look for another way of keeping the ivory away from the reach of those who are using it for other purposes than to ban it. Why do we have to ban?
Okay, we have a long-standing tradition, in Kenya about making a very strong statement about our conservation philosophy. As you're aware, in 1989, President Moi burned 12 tons of ivory, which was really significant and epic, at that time. It hadn't been done before. We set a precedent. What happened after that is we saw the prices of ivory plummet globally. And that meant that poaching also reduced. What happened during that period is we saw our elephant populations also grow. Then in the late 90s, what happened is 4 African countries appealed to the, appealed to CITES to basically, as a one-off, sell some of the ivory stockpiles that they did. Immediately after that, we saw the demand for ivory go extremely high, almost to insatiable standards. And then we saw also, again, poaching increasing and again facing the demise of our elephant populations. Kenya had warned against this happening. So this happened in the late 90s. Again, in 2008, same countries appealed to sell their stock. And then again, this is where we saw the demand rising. Given the experience that we have had as a country, we believe that if we destroy the stockpile that we have, we are sending a very clear message to the world that ivory has more value on an elephant than it does in the black markets out there. Ivory and rhino horn have more value on a live animal than in terms of trinkets in your house or the false perception that rhino horn is medicine. It's not. It's simply just keratin. That is the message that we are sending. Ivory has more value on a live animal.
We have a law. Our law is strong enough. We've seen actually people getting arrested at the airport who are transporting ivory and the artifacts. But CITES, it seems, is not really buying into our own domestic law. What should we do so that these countries that actually are using CITES to continue selling their stockpiles can actually look at it in another way, that when we destroy the ivory stockpiles, at least it's reducing the demand on the international market?
We're working with them very closely. You know, for example, one of the proposals that we have for the upcoming CITES COP17 in Johannesburg is that we would like, this is what Kenya is proposing to CITES, is that we would like all African populations moved to Appendix 1. You know, at the moment, the certain African populations are in Appendix 2. Some, like us, you know, in Kenya and most of East Africa, are in Appendix 1. And that kind of disjunction, you know, does then promote a message that we are hoping to terminate, that ivory is available for trade. The other message that also we are trying to present, or proposal that we're trying to present at CITES, is that we want to eradicate trade in domestic markets of ivory and rhino horn. Sovereign states have their own regimes, and that we have to respect. But we are just appealing, you know, for us and our position to be heard. One of the concerns that we have about this trade is that much of it is illicit. So these are international syndicates, very dangerous people that we suspect are not only involved in illegal wildlife trafficking, but we suspect that these are probably the human traffickers and all other types of contraband. So these are serious individuals, not just your average storekeeper.
Yes. At some point, Kenya Airways was coming up with a program where they were actually stopping anyone ever using their aircrafts to transport ivory. Where are we at in this particular arrangement with our own national carrier?
Our national carrier has now joined many of the other international carriers that put very strong signals saying that they do not support illicit wildlife trafficking. For example, those that are attempting to transport ivory or rhino horn within those airlines, they're going to be heavily penalized. So we're very proud of our national carrier, you know, for joining, you know, this group of airlines that are helping us to raise awareness and to promote that message. As you have also seen, those that have attempted to go through JKIA, our surveillance has been tougher than ever. We have interagency operations that are working in harmony together, and the seizures have been high than ever before, many of which are actually transit, you know, from other countries, then transiting, you know, through Kenya, either through JKIA or Mombasa Port to other destinations, mostly in the Far East.
You've actually been on the forefront of this fight, especially the fight against poaching. How has it been? How would you describe it?
It's been a very tough fight, very, very, very tough fight. When I came into office in May 16th, 2013, poaching levels were extremely high. My particular observation of one of the reasons it was high is that, first of all, our penalties were very low. Secondly, we had not had a new Wildlife Act for 20 years. So we were stagnant in terms of dealing with really the new dynamics of these syndicates, which is really what we needed. So I realized the first step in doing this was in changing the law. I faced a lot of resistance because of competing interests. I was able to bring everybody together because we were united in one thing. We needed higher penalties, right? And we needed to conserve our wildlife. So I was able to actually get this law in record time. I started May 16th. The President assented to it on December 24th, 2013, and by January 10th, it was the law. This is the result that now we have seen. As we've educated the judiciary, worked with the magistrates, had this interagency cooperations, improve our intelligence, improve our surveillance, we've seen what the results are. Of course, the law is not perfect. And at least with this new administration, the process of amending the law is ongoing. And also we invite all of our conservationists, all Kenyans, that if there are aspects of the law they want amended, they just simply write to us and we will see how we can work on that. But actually, it has been a very, very tough fight. It also included needing more boots on the ground. So since we've been in office, we've increased the number of Kenya wildlife rangers by 1,200, the highest ever in history. Of course, we have to look at our partner institution, which is the Kenya Forest Service, because in many of these ecosystems, we have both the Kenya Wildlife Service and the Kenya Forest Service in joint operations. So when it comes to the Kenya Forest Service, since we came into office, we've increased the rangers by about 500. So those are some of the initiatives that we've taken, but it's been a tough war.
What would be your call to the Kenyans out there who are just hearing about this in the media and they don't know what it's all about? What would be your call to them to be part of the conservation effort?
The presidents are basically saying to their citizens that conservation of our biodiversity is key. It is not only key for our own livelihoods, but it's also key for our foreign exchange earnings, for example, tourism. As you know very well, the foundation of tourism, in Kenya and many of these other countries is wildlife. And so these are our iconic species that we are lucky and have a privilege of hosting, because no other countries in the world have the opportunity to host such our iconic species. These iconic species belong to us. They are for Kenyans. So when we see our presidents, coming together, they want to convey that message. But they also want to convey the message of the fact that let us continue to live in harmony with these animals. They preserve our biodiversity. They improve our livelihoods. And also down on the ground there, they allow our communities to benefit from them.
As we come to the end, I would like to thank you for really giving us this time to come to speak to you and also to have a conversation over the elephants and the conservation efforts that you've made. We are quite grateful as an organization. We must see that really our conservation efforts should be able to get to a higher level now that we have the political will from our president, especially the ones who are coming to our country. We thank you so much, Professor.
I know that you're a conservationist at heart, and keep it up.